Mindfulness and compassion go hand in hand, but it's more than just feeling better about ourselves. It's also about how those two combined can improve relationships. Hi, my name is Ted Meissner, and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. Please do remember to subscribe to this podcast, as it does help a great deal. Today, we're going to be looking at research around how mindfulness and compassion can improve relationships between parent and child. Our guest today is Satish Jaiswal. Satish, welcome to the podcast, and I'm really eager to get into it with you today.
Hi, Ted, and thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Satish, and I'm a research scientist at UC San Diego.
Great. And maybe say a little bit more about that. What brought you into this kind of work?
It's been a journey, and by the time when I arrived in this field of psychiatry, I it began early as a child, where I was growing up in India, which was very much religious environment where I was growing up. So it had initial influence, but then I got into science, and science really drove me to a place. I learned a lot about things and about the world in general. So it added a lot of great qualities, attributes in my character, like being curious, being open to other possibilities or alternative narrations, and most importantly, question everything and ask for evidence. So I majored in biotechnology for my bachelor and my master's. And after I completed my master's, I was at a place where I started working in a laboratory, which was a biomedical lab, and I was not very happy at all. And that was a moment I started questioning everything, why I'm here, what exactly I want to do with my life. And then answer came very concrete and with crisp clarity that I want to do something with human mind and human behavior. And that's when I took the leap of faith, and then I started looking for opportunities where I could really contribute or work in this field. So one way I found out that pursuing a PhD will be a good option, and then it will open a lot of avenue for me. And then I started looking for PhD position all over the world, but it was very challenging for me to get into, especially switching from biotech to psychology or psychiatry was very difficult to justify to those people. But I was very fortunate that I got a fellowship in a university in Taiwan, and I just flew to Taiwan and I spent 5 years. That's another layer of complexity I was exposed to, or diverse experience I was exposed to growing up in India, then going to Taiwan, which was a totally different culture, and spending 5 years there just also nurtured me and nourished me experientially. And then I came to States in 2019 for my first postdoc. That's a big jump from from all the way far east to the far west. So so my first job was in Wisconsin Madison, UW Madison, just postdoc. So I was in the proximity of Dr. Davidson as well for a while, and then I came to UC San Diego in 2021, and then I worked with Dr. Jyoti Mishra.
That is quite a history, and I'm really appreciative of what you mentioned about this bringing in additional perspectives. That there's not just one way to look at the experience of being a human in the world, that there can be traditional things that inform how we might view the world and scientific ways too, and those don't always have to be in conflict. They're broadening our understanding of what it means to be a person in the world. So thank you for sharing about that, and I'm excited that you are here. And I want to talk a little bit about this paper we're going to be discussing today. And this is research around mindfulness and compassion. And, well, maybe you can say a little bit about what was this research about?
So I believe you're referring to the parent-child study that we recently published. It was a pilot study, actually, which was a community-based research. we recruited a parent-child dyad, and there were like 24 parent-child dyad recruited from schools and also from the local community. And it was a single arm study. We didn't have the control group. So basically, in this single arm, there was an diet intervention, which was compassion-based, breath-focused mindfulness. I'll get into detail of it, but I'm just giving a brief overview of what this study was about. So we wanted to address the challenge of many children experiencing anxiety or depression kind of symptom, even though they may not be clinically diagnosed, but the symptoms are very close to depression, and sometimes comorbidity between anxiety and depression is a bit blurred. So we wanted to address by tackling another layer of this issue is that very often when a child is suffering, it directly affects the parental mental health as well. So we wanted to address both of these questions in a one research setting. So we came up with this idea of cooperative compassion or cooperative meditation training, where parent and child practice meditation together. And then we wanted to also test the efficacy of our intervention, not just with this questionnaires, but also by including some objective measures like some cognitive task-based assessment, and also their neurophysiological assessment. In our case, we use EEG, which is electroencephalography.
And I want to mention to people who are tuning into this podcast who may not be as familiar with the research stuff is that this is so important in so many different ways. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of that later on, but in particular, things like self-report. Gosh, I went through this whole process. I better say something positive about it. And that's an effect. And that's something that science looks for. So having these kind of biometric measures that show that, oh, there has been something we can measure here above and beyond what the person is saying. That's very important. I like seeing that, and also understanding that the reasons there may not always be strong control groups in pilot studies early on, because it's a pilot study, there's more stuff to come on this,
Yeah.
is that it can be very expensive to load people into the machines. It can be very difficult to find the unique conditions needed, in this case, parent-child dyads.
Yeah.
So I thank you for all of that work, because I know that that itself is a lot. And can you tell us a little bit about just the structure of the study? What did those participants do?
So after the recruitment and screening is completed, so they had 2 visits in the lab, and on those lab visits, we administered them those some questionnaires that measures their level of anxiety, their mindfulness level, and specifically for the parents, because they are more capacity that they have this ability to respond to some of those questions. And for children, because their age is pretty diverse, pretty wide range, like 5 years old all the way to like say 12 years old. So we just give one children specific questionnaires to children, which is CDI, Child Depression Inventory, and that has two format. One was given directly to the children, and sometimes maybe interview format, and sometimes administered to them directly. And then the CDI parent version, that the part of the CDI that is a report from the parents about their children mental health. So that was specifically to find out their depression level. And remaining other questionnaire were administered to the parents directly, like measuring their mindfulness and anxiety and their compassion level and everything. And besides these questionnaires, uh, both parent and child sit next to each other in the lab and in front of a laptop or computer. and they will be going through certain tasks, cognitive tasks, with simultaneous EEG recording while they're performing those tasks. And one of the important tasks in this study was the breath counting task, which has the primary objective to measure their interoceptive awareness. And we were aiming to look into their uh, brain activity changes before they go through this intervention. And then in the second visit, they also do all these things like completing the questionnaires and doing those cognitive tasks, which is like a gamified version of those cognitive assessments. So that it's more fun, and maybe not necessarily fun all the time, because it could be exhausting too, especially for the children. But there is benefit of having those in a gamified version, that you can monitor their accuracy, their efficiency, their speed, and many more sophisticated measures based on the accuracy and the speed. And in between their first visit and their last visit, there is a period of intervention, and which is compassion based, or I would say breath focused compassion meditation, in which is a digital program that we have developed in our own lab. And it's a stepwise or level wise intervention program. So in this study, we had 5 levels, and at each level, participants were instructed or given a prompt which are related to compassion-based prompt, starting with like focus on yourself, like settling your mind and start compassion towards yourself, and then gradually increase your level of compassion at a different level from level 1 to 5, and each level indicated that how many minutes they will spend. Like say if they were on the level 2, they will spend 2 minutes maximum on the level 2, and level also indicated the number of breath they were instructed to count while they are practicing this meditation. So as they complete a threshold of we had set a threshold level of consistency at each level when they are counting their breath. Once they cross that threshold level, they will be promoted to the higher level. So from level 2 to level 3, and then so on and so forth. So these practices were meant to be performed at home in their own time and space and convenience. So parent and child would sit next to each other, and they will start those practices. And maximum for any given day, they would spend 10 minutes. And for all the diets, we had about 30 sessions throughout this intervention period that lasted from as short as, like, say, 1 month to all the way to the 3 months of period to complete the entire thing.
Okay. So with that intervention, you gathered all the data. You had the pre and the post, the test one, the test two. They did this. What were some of the results that you found after you had that second round of testing? What came from that practice?
So first thing, we were looking into that whether those participants experience any benefits or not. So that would be obviously through their self-reports. And when we looked into their depression measures, uh, we saw the trend of improvement, like reported by children as well as their parents, but that didn't reach to significance. But the p-value was 0.06, and but we saw a very obvious and a strong effect in the parents group actually, who reported pretty strong improvement in their mindfulness level and reduction in their anxiety and depression level.
Interesting. And I'm interested about is hearing from you about what these results mean. What are some of the implications of this? And you were
Sure.
mentioning early on about depression, anxiety, and may not be clinically diagnosed in children. I'm wondering if that's something that could be a precursor and that this kind of work could be a preventative from that reaching clinical levels later on in adulthood.
Absolutely. I totally believe that if there are certain measures like these that can be protective against uh, something that can potentially develop into pathological state or clinically diagnosable state. So having such intervention can be protective factor from developing any kind of clinically diagnosable state of depression, specifically in children. And another aspect of our findings were the cognitive and the neural findings. Uh, we saw there was a kind of differential pattern of responses of intervention program in parent and children. As I mentioned, the parents were more sensitive to report a stronger effect in their depression, anxiety, and their stress level improvement. But at the cognition, we saw the children in general showed very strong uh, performance on the emotion bias processing speed task. That was one of the cognitive tasks where they were shown emotional faces like neutral, happy, angry, and sad. So their speed after the intervention became faster in all of those emotional condition. For the parents, we saw the direction was quite same, but it didn't reach to significance. So we are kind of interpreting as that probably children are more sensitive at cognition level. Maybe it was a gamified version of the factor, and then parents were a bit more responsive to the behavioral aspect. Were you about to ask any question between?
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want to hear about is these kinds of results show that parents are not children, children are not parents. We may
Yeah.
see different effects, and that's not wrong.
And then I wanted to add the neural part here as well, which was something the most fascinating part from our, based on our hypothesis, was something that we were expecting to see something in their default mode network activity. When I talk about these networks, we didn't use any neuroimaging like MRI like neuroimaging, but we use source localized technique that is derived from EEG activities. And default mode network in general is well known to involve in the distracted mind or wandering mind. And in one of our previous study on physicians, actually, we showed that uh, after this two-tap task, which was the breath counting task that I earlier mentioned, that was our one of the primary assessment tool for a neurological assessment. That's where we found that children and parent altogether showed reduction in the default mode network activity. But when we further parse between parent and children, children were the one showed stronger effect, or I would say the most of the significant effect was driven by children's group. So they indeed benefited or kind of indicated the neuroplasticity in their default mode network activity.
That is really fascinating because as many of us who are mindfulness teachers do bring up the default mode network in our teaching for people to have an understanding that the way our brains are normally working is mind wandering and distraction. And in particular with apps and phones and social media and all the rest of it calling our attention in more and more and more different directions and very, very quickly, it could really be of benefit to shift that tide. And this kind of research shows that mindfulness can be very helpful. It sounds like even perhaps more helpful for children in
Yeah,
switching that around than for those of us who have older brains that are a little more hardwired.
yeah.
Okay. What else? Is there anything else you can think of that you'd like to share about this work, or perhaps what you are interested in seeing happen as next steps in research around this?
So we definitely want to build upon these pilot findings, and one way to add a bit more weight to this line of research would be adding a control group and possibly having a control intervention, not just the inactive control group, which is something often talk about in the contemplative, science. So, but that's one thing we look forward to, but we're like, trying our luck with fundings, which is always the case. But for now, uh, we are using the same tools like the two-tap task or the breath counting task that I mentioned earlier. Is one of the primary tool has become in quite central to most of our projects that are ongoing or that we are already concluded. So yeah, so I think we are quite optimistic about the potential of interoceptive attention measurement, and that is based on some objective assessment like neuro default mode network activity or neuroplasticity around default mode network activity. So currently we are com concluding one of the depression study that was done in clinically depressed patients, and they went through TMS treatment, but also one of the intervention group had to go through mindfulness training as well that has breath counting aspect in it.
So more to come, and I hope you'll
Yeah.
return to tell us when there have been some more of this work published. For those who are watching this episode, I'm going to have a link to the paper that we've been discussing today, as well as more information about our guest. Satish Jaiswal, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you come back soon.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
Thanks so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and this has given you a little bit of insight into how mindfulness and compassion can improve relationships in your life. Again, please do remember to tap that subscribe button. It helps a great deal. And remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. And I'll see you next time on Mindfulness Voyage.